Good evening. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by FL Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL's Josh Miller, for our final show of the year. Good evening, Josh.
Hello, Dan.
And this evening, we're talking some software. Lennie Moreno will be by from the startup Sofdesk, and we'll be talking about taxes and partnerships with Nick Moraitis towards the end of the program.
You know, a lot of businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs that we interview, Dan, there's a lot of partners involved, a lot of shareholders, and but there's some tax things. I mean, other than the partnership, and you know, you've lived through a partnership or two. I know I have. They're lots of fun, but there's a certain tax element to it that some challenges that entrepreneurs should absolutely be aware of.
Paperwork. Pretty important, so we'll get to that later in the show. And of course, Lennie's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur as well. But first, let's take a look at some entrepreneurial news of the week. And the big tech news last week, what we call Twiddle, this week in data loss.
Twiddle notes are Twiddle notes.
Yahoo says hackers stole information from over 1 billion accounts. 14-year-old me who was on Yahoo chat is devastated by this. But adult me thinks it's okay. But if you do have a Yahoo account, obviously you have to take some precautions, especially if you're using it for your business. How do you even quantify a loss like this for a business like Yahoo's?
It's unbelievable. You know, the damage control that has to come in. It's actually even worse than that because the hack happened in 2013. It happened 3+ years ago. And, you know, the fact that it took X amount of time to announce it. I'm sure there's a lot of background. I'm sure they have to figure out what's been hacked or how or who. I'm sure they want to try and trace it where possible. But the fact that it's 3.5 years later, so now there's a class action lawsuit that I believe there's a Canadian firm that's representing some Canadians, because it's great to be told now, but what happened 3 years ago and 2 years ago when this hacker had all this information, when this hacker could go out and, you know, before maybe people were a little bit password sensitive, although they should be always, there's no question about it. But it's just be careful, buyer beware. And of course, and I'm terrible at this. I mean, not that I have the 1, 2, 3, 4 password, but I probably don't have enough different passwords across the board. And it's I'm at risk. I know I'm at risk. I don't know about you, Dan. And it may not be the easiest password that I have, but it's certainly not 12 different ones for 12 different sites.
You know, my passwords are changed regularly, so we'd like to keep up to date on that. But more broadly, I'm not too worried because I've for many years now, even before this latest round of hacks, I just don't put stuff on the internet that is sensitive. Period. If there's a sensitive document and need to take to a client, for example, I put it on a USB and I drive to their office.
And for businesses or entrepreneurs or owners, you know, there's a lot of sensitive information that your employees have. How many times do you force a password change for your employees? I don't know too many businesses that force a password change. I know we do at the firm, you know, periodically we say you need to change your password every X number of months. I should adhere to that one day. But businesses can protect their own information, at least to a certain degree, by changing some of the passwords. I know it's more complicated than that. I know hackers can kind of get through and get other information, but at least from a personal nature, just trying to have at least one small wall, you got to be done.
For sure, and definitely change those passwords on a regular basis. Made in Canada, certainly a very prestigious label. Kind of means different things depending on the history of the product, but in the States, it's actually kind of desirable, this Made in Canada label.
Well, I think it's more the not made in China or not made in a country that is not so close or doesn't necessarily have the reputation that the, say, Americans would like. And I know we're entering into 2017, and who knows what kind of protectionism is going to come up with President-elect the Donald, and what walls, figurative or literal, might be there. But there's no question, being made in Canada, there have been a number of brands that have clung to that and just made it happen, found that niche just for that. I mean, you look at these Canada Goose, you look at a number of products, and we've had a number of guests on the air, Dan, where they make stuff here. Now, yes, is it customized? Does it take a little longer? Is it a little more expensive? Yes, but it's quality. It's made here. It's not cheaply done, and it's readily accessible.
It does vary with definition, though. I mean, depending on what is made it. I mean, some parts can be made elsewhere.
Correct. There
What are the
is
rules
that
behind
conversion.
that?
I don't know if I know the specific rule. I don't know if it has to be at least 30% converted in Canada or 40 before you can actually attach a label to it. And like anything, there's always numbers and a little twitch behind every single ruling, and it's marketing. So you can have marketing say anything. But there has to be at least a minimum conversion. And if you actually have 100% in Canada or some major amount, why not advertise that? I think it's going to get you that much further.
The Shaughnessy Village is an interesting neighborhood in Montreal. It's right close to downtown, but has been underdeveloped for many years. And now there's this extraordinary opportunity with the old children's hospital being raised, and it's going to make room for basically a small neighborhood.
That's it. Children's Hospital is finally going to have a facelift, or should we say a demolish and a rebuild, not a facelift. I think they might be keeping one building, but of course in the end it's far too expensive with certainly the building codes today and everything that happens. So somebody has purchased it. As a matter of fact, somebody purchased it, was going to develop it, sold it to somebody else, and now that person that has purchased it is going to build this monstrosity. It's going to be, like you say, a little mini village, it's going to be residential, it's going to be commercial, it's going to be some small park. They're really going to make quite. I think the Yule is like that too. In downtown on René-Lévesque, they're kind of making that community. So it's not just a building, but it's that whole aspect of everything rolled into one. You kind of see that when I was in China. You see that happening all the time. These now to a larger scale, of course. It's not just 5,000 people in a community. It's more like 250,000 people in a community like that, where you have residential buildings and commercial space and parks and recreation, and everything is interlinked. And underground access, et cetera, et cetera. You're just seeing them pop up everywhere. Whether it's a matter of convenience, whether I don't know at what point people want to stay within their bubble or get out. For me, yeah, great to have the convenience, but I like to get out of my bubble, so I don't want to always stay in that incestuous neighborhood. But to each his own, of course.
But on a day like this when it's cold, I mean, gotta love that model, that Westmount Square model that worked so good a few decades later seems to be coming back.
In a climate like ours, absolutely. If it was a climate that was, more adapt to being outside and what have you, then maybe not, but anyhow, to each his own. It's just because it's not for me doesn't mean there's not a market out there.
And how is GM going to put in this sustainability program by taking furniture out of landfills? Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is an article I read where I don't recall how many landfills that they fill or too many, but the amount of office furniture that gets tossed aside every single year by GE alone, let alone, I mean, there's certainly of all the businesses out there, GE has started this program where they are giving away all the furniture that they don't use, and they close and open locations, and they between the growth and rejuvenation and all that, they are giving away furniture. They're sending it to schools, they're sending it to the underprivileged, to different low income homes and housing area, and I think it's great because it's that reuse, recycle. I think they're taking it to the nth degree, and they're keeping it out of the landfills, because when you have all these desks and furniture, where else is there to put them? You can burn them, but I don't think people are burning them too much.
Coming up on Today's Entrepreneur, we'll chat with Lennie Moreno of Sofdesk, and we'll talk taxes and partnerships later on in the program with Nick Moraitis of FL. But first, it's 7:15. Welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL's Josh Miller with you. And this evening we welcome Lennie Moreno of Sofdesk. Welcome to CJD, Lennie.
Thanks for having me, and really thank you for for having this show, because honestly, I think that you need more shows like this to actually inspire people, and like the form of entertainment that's out there is it's not productive enough. So honestly, thanks a lot for having me, and thanks for having this show. It's really a blessing to be here.
Well, thanks. The show's inspired me too over the years. So,
no, absolutely, and the education factor, for other entrepreneurs and listeners, I think we're doing a service. We like to think we're doing a service.
Right.
So, Lennie, before the show, you said you were going to come on and freestyle because you used to be a rapper, so you can literally freestyle if you'd like. But why don't you freestyle to start about Sofdesk? Tell me about the business. What do you do, and how did you get there?
Yes, yes, of course. So I used to be a solar installer. That was my first company, and then I realized that there was a lot of things missing, really, in order to be more efficient, to accelerate the sales, to accelerate the entire process of installing solar. So what happened is that I was installing, and then I did everything. So I was finding the leads, the prospects myself. I was doing the entire sale, the entire project management, the installation. I was monitoring the system. I was dealing with the distribution companies. And then I just packaged everything on a piece of paper. And I said, you know what? I want to help all the solar installers out there to actually do something that's efficient for them, because a lot of contractors, they're not the most computer savvy people. So we were able to design with Sofdesk a perfect platform which basically embodies all of that together. So it's an all-in-one sales accelerating platform, and now it's becoming a marketplace. We have over 250 solar installation companies that are using it as, their day-to-day tool, and they can basically enter an address, and they can draw the lines on the satellite imagery of any address, of any roof, and then it's going to spit out a proposal based on their parameters, their pricing, their materials that they're using. It's going to give all the environmental impact, the calculations, the financials. You can e-sign the document, and then you can project manage everything from A to Z. And plus, you can get your business, you can get your leads directly on the platform. So that's all you need in order to manage something. So now we're in over 25 states in the U.S., and we're also in Canada. And we're really killing it right now.
So as we go back to not quite the beginning, but almost, what do you know about software development? I mean, you knew about installing solar panels on a roof, but what did you know about software development?
Look, I think that the key thing for a good entrepreneur is knowing what he's not the best at. I can't code. I'm not going to sit around here and pretend that I'm the best coder. So you have to surround yourself with the best people that you're not the best at. So I partnered up with two guys. One of them, he's the best software developer I've ever met, and I met a lot of them. His name is Max. Max, if you're hearing this, shout out. But
he's supposed to be listening. He's your partner. He's supposed to be listening.
These family people, sometimes they have like their daughters yelling, and they have to take care of a lot of stuff. But the important thing is that I was able to partner up with the right people, and we complete each other very well. And that's a key thing in business. You have to complete each other, and you cannot micromanage. You cannot pretend like you know everything. So that's one thing that I'm really happy that we're able to do.
And there's no question, team is hugely important. We hear that all the time from entrepreneurs. And when we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit about more human resources and how you find people, and really what you look for in that key partner and employee.
Lennie Moreno of Sofdesk joins us this evening on Today's Entrepreneur. This evening on the program, we're joined by Lennie Moreno of Sofdesk. This is software that helps roofing and the installation and connectivity when it comes to solar. So this is pretty interesting, because back in the old days, I guess, Lennie, when you needed a roofer, you called him up. He'd have to get in his car, drive a half hour to your house, get up on the roof, take measurements.
Yeah.
So you were working as a roofer yourself, and you decided, well, hey, I can solve this.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was working as a solar installer myself, but this is completely insane. Like, why would you travel 30 minutes, an hour, go on the roof, spend time, spend money, buy food on the way with no guarantee that the guy is going to sign the contract? So we're giving you a tool that is basically reducing all of your soft costs, and then you're able to apply these savings to reduce the overall price of that turnkey solution to go solar. So you can be a lot more competitive, and you're saving so much time, so much money. So we were able to basically have all of our clients save millions of dollars just on that, and then be a lot more competitive and empower the entire solar industry. And that's the way to do it. You cannot stick to your old ways and walk around with a piece of paper and take like physical measurements. This is not the way.
So is it easy to market your product? Is it easy to go up and say, hey, what, you're going to save a boatload of money and time, which is money, of course, soft costs,
right,
by using this product?
I think that one of the key ingredients that happened, because I crossed America driving from Montreal to LA, Then I stayed 4 months in LA because that's like 35% of our market. Then I drove from LA to Florida and then Florida back to Montreal. I met with hundreds of solar installation companies, and I was able to show them as them. I am you. I am the solar installer that used to do exactly what you're doing right now. I went through the same line of problems, and here I am with the solution. I'm telling you, I've tried it, I worked it, I did the same steps as you did, and that's how people will relate. And the reason why we're really winning this market is because people can relate to someone who did the same thing as them.
Does that mean you can't train your people to give the same sales pitch as you do?
You know what I'm doing actually? We're really a sales accelerator platform. So by doing that, the smartest thing to do is spread the knowledge. I'm giving tricks that I used to use to close deals, and I'm giving that like publicly. Anyone that's a member has access to all the tips and all the tricks to the trade that I used to do, because I sold for tens of millions of dollars of residential solar back when I was a salesman and an installer. So I'm giving all these tricks and we're incorporating and coding these directly into the platform, so it's easy for them.
So more marketing, and of course you went for some Series A funding, a round of financing. We'll hear about that too, and some lessons learned when we come back.
We're chatting with Lennie Moreno of Sofdesk this evening on Today's Entrepreneur at 7:30. This evening, we're chatting with Lennie Moreno of Sofdesk, and coming up later, Nick Moraitis from FL will be along to talk about partnerships. But first, Josh Miller, back to Lennie, and I think an interesting phenomenon. We were talking about this last week on the show, how there's so many ideas that come from employees, and here with Lennie, we have someone who was an employee installing solar panels and said, well, there's got to be a better way. And so initially, Lennie, you went on the road to market Sofdesk, and now you've merged more to online sales. So tell us about that first pitch and how your marketing has evolved since then.
Yeah. I mean, it's not sustainable to actually just go on the road and meet people face to face. It's costly, it takes some time, it takes some energy. The reason why I crossed America and I did it is because you want feedback from the ground and you want to show traction. And that's what we did, and that's what we've accomplished. But moving forward, we have organized everything with HubSpot. And honestly, HubSpot should pay me for this advertising. But honestly, if you think about it, you have to do marketing and sales automation. And that's what we're doing right now. All the things that we can automate, we automate them. So based on behaviors, people that go on your site, that fills out a form, that subscribes to a newsletter, then it triggers an action, an email, a survey, and then it qualifies a whole bunch of clients based on what you want to do and who you need to follow up first. So I think that this approach should be used by a lot of companies to automate the maximum things that they can automate.
Did you know about HubSpot before? How did you choose HubSpot over a different platform?
Well, we deal with a marketing firm here for a year now that was a big advocate. So we were a bit skeptical. I got to say, it's been on the expensive side, but honestly, the price is worth it. So they convinced us, they made a whole presentation on how it works, and then we said, you know what, we'll try it, we'll adopt it, and now we got all of our sales, our marketing, our client care, our retention processes all triggered automatically, and we have reduced our churn rate tremendously just because of that. It takes care of clients without you having to put that much effort.
And you're in an interesting industry, so there's a lot of education going on, and certainly, different parts of the world treat solar energy differently.
Right. Well, I got to say that here in Quebec, I think that they need to put a little bit more incentives, and I'm speaking straight to the government. I mean, you need to watch what's happening out there, and even if the price per kilowatt hour is so low, there's still some avenues and there's still some opportunities if you think about what we can accomplish with renewable energy. So if you look at Ontario, for example, in 2009, they started the microfit program. They started with a big incentive. It was 80.2 cents per kilowatt hour to sell it back to the grid. And a whole bunch of people jumped on it like a gold mine. It created a whole bunch of jobs. It created a whole bunch of projects. So I think that we need to basically focus on what the successful spots have done in solar and duplicate that, start with a micro project and then expand it. Look at California. Look at over 20 states in the US. It's profitable to go solar. It's even profitable in the UK, even if there's no sun, but because the government is backing it properly. So, this is my message to governments, utilities. You really need to look at the long-term payback. In the end, it does make sense financially, and that's what investors are looking for. So we're in the right business, that I guarantee.
My next question was about the technology. What about the argument that it's too cloudy here, or too snowy? I mean, you look at countries like Germany; they seem to make it work.
Of course. It's really not that much about the weather. The technology is there. It's really about how you make it profitable. In terms of installing it straight south with the right angle, that is just details. But in the end, are the incentives there to make it profitable? And now, with the price of solar going down and the price of batteries going down as well, we're finding turnkey solutions to be extremely profitable, so that the price for an entire turnkey solution, we're reaching grid parity soon, which means that the price for conventional electricity is becoming the same or higher than renewable energy. So once we're reaching that target, which is very soon, and they've reached it in many spots, I'm telling you, solar will be the number one spot.
Now we're going to switch gears a little bit because of all this development and technology and growth factor. Does require a little bit of financing behind it. It's not just about donating time and resources. Right. You really got to go out and you got to find your financing. You got to go find your sources. You've been recently. You're going through a Series A or a round of financing. Right. A lot of people, a lot of listeners, a lot of entrepreneurs hear about rounds of financing and Series A. Right. What's been your experience? What kind of knowledge can you impart?
I can stay all night talking about this because
you got 2.5 minutes.
Okay, right. All right. Well, I can tell you something. If you want to be at the top, you need to surround yourself with the best. And when I'm talking about the best, I mean the best in your industry. The people that can back you in the right spot, the people that can back you for the right things, for the things that you're missing.
Is it because it's credibility? It just adds that much more credibility?
Well, it's that, but it's also opportunity, because they're giving you a whole bunch of contacts. I'm not going to name any names right now, but I was at our investors' annual meeting. It was in the south of Florida, and we spent some amazing time. 4 days. We had the most amazing time, 150 people, and all inside the clean tech industry. So just in that meeting, the amount of contacts and business opportunities for other businesses and strategic partners that are invested in the same fund to make deals together, it grows these opportunities just together. So
you're saying they feed off each other?
They feed off each other, and they find ways to partner up, because everybody wants to make money in the end. So if people will find a fit and they trust you and they trust the people that are backing you, then you're in the right fund. But to the ones listening that are looking for financing, you have to do your homework. You have to make sure that you know your market. You have to make sure that you're with the right people. You're surrounded with the right team, that your product is not obsolete or it's not way too competitive. There's a lot of things that I can say. I mean, I give some speeches sometimes to young startups, young entrepreneurs, to give them some of my perspective of, like what I've been through.
Like when they're going to pitch their product, their service, what do you tell them? Like, what do you tell them to either avoid or focus on when they're sitting in front of them, some sophisticated investors?
Yeah, my number one advice is know your stuff. You have to know your stuff. If these people, they know what they're doing. In the end, they're looking at the bottom line. And what is the bottom line? Return on investment for that fund. The fund is looking to make X amount of profit, X amount of times the amount invested. So if you can find a way to show your model and make sure that it makes sense and make sure that there's a market and make sure that you got the right team and you're in the right timing for your product, then there's no way in hell why investors wouldn't support you. And the other last thing I want to say about this is, a lot of people say, let's talk about the entrepreneurs, what they can do. I can tell a little bit about what the investors can do. And I honestly want them to know that it's important to support the real instead of supporting the phony. You have to support the real when it comes to what is this entrepreneur wants from life. It's not just about the money. There's a lot of other things that has to make sense, and not just the product. It's, yes, there is a return on investment, but there is something beyond just money, and that's what you want to support.
It's a package, and we see that actually time and time again, where investors, whether it's commercial bankers or angel investors, they invest in the individual at least as much as they invest in the product or service. We see that time and time again, and I know we, like you say, Lenny, we could talk about this all night. But as we come up to our next break, and we're going to have Nick come in, because I know, Lenny, you have partners, and there's definitely some partner issues, not just from a legal standpoint, but there's some tax planning and a lot to go with it. So we're going to welcome Nick Moraitis to discuss that after the next break.
All about partnerships next on Today's Entrepreneur at 7:45. Welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL's Josh Miller with you. We have Lennie Moreno, our guest this evening from Sofdesk. His one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur is on the way. And we welcome Nick Moraitis, tax partner at FL, to talk about partners. You guys are partners.
We are. There's different partners and partnerships. There's also shareholders. A lot of companies really have shareholders that work together. They call themselves partners, but the legal entity is shareholders. And Nick keeps nodding. He's like busting at the seams to try and talk. So, Nick, what can you tell us in your tax world? Your tax world and shareholders. What comes to
in
mind?
our entrepreneurial world, your shareholders are partners, because they're usually involved in the business. It's not like you're buying a public company where you never even know where the head office is. So, Lenny, you mentioned, getting the right people around you as your partners. And I think that's more important than anything that I'm about to say. But once you get those people involved, and usually what we tend to find is that the relationship between the partners and what the business is doing has to be settled out. Which partners are going to be the voting partners? Which partners maybe are not going to be the voting partners? Which partners are putting in the money? Which partners cannot put in the money, but they're putting in the skill? And how do you reward he who's providing capital, and how do you reward he who's providing the sweat? And that's a lot of where we sit down, we look at. It works in a partnership, and it works in a company, but we use different tools. And many times when you're looking at a company, you're looking at shares. Everybody says, I'm going to have common shares, and which is fine, because common shares are the guys who get whatever is left over in the company. You share it amongst the common shareholders. But what if you're doing all the work, and you're there 60 hours a week, and somebody else says, well, I don't necessarily want to work, but I like your idea. I'll supply the capital. So should he have the same rights to profit as you? And that's where we get a lot of discussion, which therefore leads into a very important document, which is the shareholders agreement. And many times at the beginning, at the inception, at the business, who has money to pay on the shareholders agreement? All you want to do is get your product to market or get your service to market, start generating some sales, and figure out who's really doing what. But at some point in time, you get a guy like Josh or myself coming along, knocking on your door, but where is your shareholders agreement? Let's get it done now while things are going well, while everybody's talking to each other, to establish what's our rights and responsibilities. And that's a key document. So you had a comment?
Yeah. I think that
while
you
I was
are.
Talking?
Yeah, I think that
it's just like home for Nick. We just keep going.
I think that you're absolutely right, but it's important to do it really at the basis, at the root, in the beginning of the company, because as soon as you see some traction, people, they just have a tendency to become greedy.
Well, I'm very glad that you said that.
You want to make sure,
because you're living it.
Oh, I
as
I
opposed
know about
to me
it.
saying that, and you're thinking I'm selling something. But you're absolutely correct. It's usually that's the time, is when you're sitting around the table. Here's our idea. Let's talk about some basic parameters. Who's going to be the boss? What are the responsibilities of everybody else? What happens if we want to buy each other out? Who's going to put up the money, and under what conditions? If the bank is going to also be putting in money, they're going to probably want somebody to guarantee. Well, is it all for one and one for all, or is it going to be just you for some part and I'm off? And that's what the shareholders agreement is trying to establish. And it's sort of like, I hate to say, it's like a prenup in a sense, because you're trying to establish a relationship when everybody, I guess, loves each other, as to what's going to happen when we do not love each other.
I agree. And I couldn't agree more. And I think it's the same relationship between the investors and the entrepreneurs. It's like a marriage.
That's actually even more, because an investor is where we're moving away from the partner word that Josh mentioned before. Right. Now you're bringing in an investor. Someone's putting in money and is expecting results. He's not there necessarily with you day in and day out, but he can't provide you advice. He can sit on your board, tell you this is what's happening in the market, but he has a very different perspective where this might become your baby.
Right.
Where it's not his baby.
And then there's possibility of an employee becoming a partner or a shareholder. And when we come back from the break, we'll challenge Nick with that as well.
Partnerships, Nick Moraitis from FL and Lennie Moreno from Sofdesk will have Lennie's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur in just a moment. Partners this evening to end today's entrepreneur. Nick Moraitis, tax partner at FL with us, and Lennie Moreno of Sofdesk. His one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur on the way. But first, Josh, that complicated that partnership process, especially when you have a new one on the way.
And, the time of the year, there's January 1st coming up, a lot of new partners getting named, or shareholders. But sometimes you have a really key employee, somebody that puts their heart and soul in it, that you actually want to include as a shareholder. You didn't necessarily imagine it when they first came on board, but they certainly built it up. What are the challenges, Nick, to bringing on an employee as a shareholder, especially if they have no money?
Well, okay, that was my thunder. The question is, if they have the money, there's no big challenge. We find a lawyer, we do an agreement, and they're there. The issue, though, with most is that you have someone who is vital to the business. There's a long term with this individual, but they don't have the funds to come in and buy out a certain percentage, unless it's such a meaningless percentage. So what we look at is there's different techniques, and there's pros and cons. There's a notion of an option. We can have an option that you will acquire shares at whatever price today, or I want to give you shares in a private company and these shares are worth X. You have to hold on to them for a certain period of time, and there's tax consequences arising from that. There's others who might turn around and say, look, I want you to put some money in the company. Find something so that there's a little bit of sweat involved. Because when you have nothing invested, you lose the perspective that power. So let's put in something, but it's not going to be anywhere near what the company's worth, and then we'll work with the options. We'll work with maybe a very strong bonus system. We'll work with something to give you the right to participate. And a lot of them are figuring that at some point in time, if there's a liquidity event in the future, I have my skin in the game. A, and B, there's something that I can get the monumental cash flow if ever the company is sold, or as Len goes public in a few years, I guess, right, Len? So that's
but you can't just give it and walk away. There's definitely implications. Thank you thanks so much, Nick.
No,
and as we approach the last moment of our show and the last show of 2016, Dan, we'll turn to Lennie Moreno of Sofdesk and ask you, Lennie, what would be your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
Yeah, I had a few seconds to think about it, and honestly, I'm speaking directly to the entrepreneur that still has his job and is making a project on the side. I say to you, think about whether or not this is really for you, because the amount of sacrifice that it takes if you have no money and you have no support and you have to start from scratch, you have to be willing to absorb a whole bunch of sacrifices. And I'm talking about no money, no lifestyle, sleepless nights, debts, problems, and you have to be willing to take it in. So think about whether or not this is really for you, that you're ready to make the jump. It can take a toll not only on your life and your business and your money and your bank account, but on your love relationships, on your family, on your friendships. This is a big, big commitment. And if you're not ready to really put it on the line, then you're not meant for this. And that's my one piece of advice.
Thanks so much, Lennie. Lennie Moreno from Sofdesk. Nick Moraitis, tax partner at FL. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
And Josh, another year wraps up. We'll see you back here in January.
Back towards the end of January, Dan, with some other great entrepreneurs and great stories and great pieces of advice.
We'll see you next year.
Take care, guys. Don't forget the holiday is a great time to brainstorm for entrepreneurial activities in the new year.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Time to reinvent.
Thanks, guys. Happy holidays.
Bye.